Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another edition of the What's Up series. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Kylah McNabb, Principal for Vesta Strategic Solutions. She's had a wealth of experience in Oklahoma across the energy sector, and today we're hoping to discuss kind of the first half of the Oklahoma 60th legislative session that just concluded earlier this spring. Kylah, welcome and thanks for being here. And if you have anything you want to add to your bio, please let us know.
Thanks, Noah. I'm so excited to be here. Just hope folks will get a chance to hear kind of what's going on in Oklahoma in the energy sphere.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate your hard work up there. I know I definitely appreciated being able to check out your social media feeds throughout session to kind of keep me in the loop. And so to start with, we went into session with a lot of new things, new leadership, and also new expectations, specifically around renewable resources, renewable energy. And we kind of assumed or thought that that was going to be kind of a hot topic throughout session. So high level, was that true? Did it come to fruition? And what bills exactly did you think kind of got legs and will have the biggest impact on energy production, energy prices now that we've kind of entered this sine die period?
Yeah, renewable energy definitely was a focus of conversations in a lot of legislation this year. Going into each legislative session in Oklahoma, we always expect some policy items to come up, no matter how mature our industry is, though we've had wind turbines in the ground now for 20 years, there's always going to be kind of the next element. But this year, I think what turned really interesting were the back to basics almost policy questions of what do setbacks look like? What do siting considerations look like? Who has control over the siting? And you're seeing these come up because essentially the expansion of renewable energy across Oklahoma, where you've seen wind power again over the past 20 years in the western part of the state, it's now starting to move east. And it also echoes, I think, probably a sentiment and kind of a trend we're seeing across the industry in general, which is really this. I don't know how to say it other than a back to basics questions of what are the actual impacts of wind turbines. So we saw multiple bills that were trying to put forth were really truly restrictive setbacks in place that were meant to prevent, large scale energy projects from being put in.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, as you know, SPEAR is a regional organization. We operate in both Texas and Oklahoma, and similar here in Texas during our last legislative session, a lot of setback legislation on renewable resources, a lot of discussions that we've heard, and I'm interested to hear if this came up through some of the committee hearings and through the process. But private property rights, as it relates to
Mm.
that, I think that was a really big piece that a lot of organizations in Texas were trying to promote for renewable energy. Is that something that you saw in Oklahoma, or is that kind of still something that's being developed?
No, absolutely. It's something that we're seeing in Oklahoma too. Just like in Texas, you have wonderful landowners, and I think private property rights is a very big consideration. I would say even expansion of private property considerations into transmission development this year. So even going beyond traditional energy project developments, you're seeing private property considerations when it comes to what does it mean and how much power do I have as a landowner to say what happens on my property with transmission lines. So it is definitely a central part of the conversation and is always a difficult one. We all have what we like to see happen on our property, what we are affected by with what our neighbors decide, whether you're a landowner or live in a typical neighborhood like me in a suburban neighborhood. I still have to look at whatever kind of shed my neighbor puts up, no matter the regulations. So similar in manner. How can we be conscientious neighbors for each other?
Absolutely. And so obviously there's a huge focus kind of all throughout the country on this generation side of resources. How do we get more, natural gas? How do we get more wind, solar, et cetera? In my couple years, I've been with Spirit for 4 years almost, and this is now, I guess, technically the second full session I've been through with Oklahoma. This is the first time that I've really been able to track a lot of demand side policy legislation. We really haven't seen, I mean, there's been some bills on energy codes, building codes, but nothing like we saw, I think, in this session, or at least the last couple of years. They looked at establishing energy efficiency plans for industrial customers, for instance, publishing energy efficiency incentive programs on the ODOC website, reauthorization of tax credits for energy efficiency, among others. I don't believe any of those bills passed, but I'm interested to hear kind of where you think Oklahoma stands with these DSM programs, demand side management programs, or what kind of appetite you think there may be moving forward for some additional, look at these DSM, bills and possibilities.
The element of the DSM, the demand side management, and these energy efficiency elements was very curious to me this session. Again, not something you hear a lot about often in Oklahoma. We're a low-cost energy state, some of the lowest energy prices in the country, and oftentimes that just leads to energy efficiency being put, lower down on priorities. So I think what you're seeing is a refocus on this due to the costs from Winter Storm Uri really starting to be felt on customer bills, both from a residential and an industrial consumer side. Along with, I do think it's part of the business friendly aspect of Oklahoma. Of course, we want to recruit businesses to the state. We want to see, like every other state, want to see those data center expansions taking place and happening and utilizing the energy that we have to be able to provide from the state of Oklahoma. And I think it goes part and parcel with that as well. Um, that you see this focus to make sure that they're good stewards of what electricity and how many electrons are actually being used.
Well, and also I just had on there, they're obviously an incredibly cost-effective resource, right? It's what we talk about both in Oklahoma and Texas. And we definitely, down here in Texas, we actually look up to Oklahoma's utility programs and are always in awe about kind of the work that you guys do up there. It's obviously a much different market, it's a different ISO, but there's a lot of good work being done, but obviously there's room for growth. So always happy to hear that. And now that we've got this first half of the session over with, we start the fun part of regulatory implementation. So, and we go through this interim process. There's interim studies. I want to kind of open it up broadly and say, what are you looking for during this interim or in the implementation process? What are some of the priorities that you all have as an organization? And I kind of add on one last question and give you a lot of room to speak here. How can organizations like Spear or others kind of join in and help out where where their priorities align and make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think looking at the interim now, it turns to how the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, the Utility Commission, does look to implement some of these new regulations and where they fit in the policy sphere. They, of course, as always, have a whole lot on their plate. And so it may take a few months for them to really start taking a deeper dive, but making sure to check in and see where they stand with potential, rulemaking procedures. I think that is an excellent opportunity for organizations like Spear and other groups to get involved because that's where your voice is heard on these topics. That's where you get to, showcase what impact these proposed policies have on you as an organization and on the associated ratepayers. I'm also taking a look at and following what interim studies are taking place. So you often do see in Oklahoma interim studies either continue the conversation on policies that did not follow through all the way or that want to go deeper into maybe new questions that were raised during policy discussions during the legislative session. One we are seeing is on agrivoltaics, actually. There was a proposed piece of legislation to do a study on agrivoltaics that did not move forward. So we are now seeing an interim study being put forth at the 1st of September regarding that. Where does agrivoltaics make sense in Oklahoma? Is it with cattle? Is it with, crop production? And then again, like I mentioned, earlier, the transmission property rights and personal property rights, where does that line come into play? Where does eminent domain come into play when it comes to power plants and what force of effect that they can have? So there's going to be a couple interim studies on that. As well as franchise fees on utilities. So I always something interesting going on. That is for sure. Always something to keep an eye on, and then you never know what questions even come out of the interim studies that can cause a curveball for another piece of legislation to get filed at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think those are all incredibly important and big, things to look into. I think we're seeing some overlap too in other parts of the country, like you mentioned with agrivoltaics, or like you mentioned with some of these franchise fees and other aspects are really important. I should have said this at the start, but Oklahoma has essentially a 2-year session, right? It's split in half. It's a little bit different. Some states like Texas, we just have it for 140 days every 2 years. Oklahoma kind of splits it up a little bit. So we're looking forward. The best part of my job, I think, is this kind of speculation. I mean, and you kind of hit on a bunch of it there by looking at some of those interim studies and those conversations. But are there any other kind of expectations as you're looking forward to next, I guess, late fall or late winter, early spring? We talked a little bit about private property rights and transmission rights. Could that be something you're looking into? Data center, regulation is another one. I know Texas had a lot of bills focused on that, and whether it's like bring your own generation
Mhm.
or other types of discussions there. What are your kind of expectations as you look forward to the next half of the session?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that the bring your own generation discussion because I think everyone is laser focused in on, these large loads, data, mainly data centers, but any number of large loads taking place, and what we can do to power that to maintain what we need as a country. And Oklahoma did make progress this year by passing a policy enabling large loads to do behind the meter generation. Now, they did note that natural gas is a preferred fuel of choice for that. And so, where I think that opens the door, and one of the elements that I would love to see happen is let's look at some efficiency standards for, these large data centers. It's not very hard, I think, to take a look at, for instance, ground source geothermal heat pumps for these facilities, provide that radiant floor cooling that these large institutions need. Just drill it right down underneath before you pour the concrete pads. Taking a look at things like that. I hope that, as these interim studies take a look at, what do we need to do to help encourage and how does Oklahoma land these data centers, that policies like that can be seen as an encouragement more than anything.
For sure. Well, Kyla, we appreciate it. Is there anything we missed? Are you looking forward to anything crazy over the next couple weeks, or is just kind of you ready to come down to Texas and see us for the Sphere Conference?
I'm very excited to come down for the Sphere Conference. I can tell you that. Even though this Sooner is going to have to walk on to the campus of UT Austin, I will be proudly wearing my Boomer Sooner red. But, the next couple weeks is, I think, still kind of quiet. I think it's going to be deeper into the fall before things get super interesting. And I will say the one lesson we learned from this past year is curveballs are going to come up. We did not expect this past session to have such a focus and such a very highly visible conversation around renewable energy and energy efficiency. So I would just expect that to continue this year. So I think we have to be prepared really, truly, pretty much for anything.
Looking for the curve. Well, Kyla,
Welcome
we
for the
appreciate
curve.
it. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Noah. See you soon.